The bulk of my research data was collected between 2009 and 2010 in the city of Trinidad in Cuba, in 2 field trips, each lasting 2 months. The first excursion was to familiarise myself with the environment, improve my language skills, and get to know better the members of Cuba Haiti, whose acquaintances I had made the previous year. During this time, I kept a personal journal, reflecting on the questions that arose as the result of the observations, interactions, and conversations I had with the people I met. From my immutable position as a white woman, the various roles I inhabited as a tourist, friend, anthropology student, and citizen of a Western country had an effect on the relationships I began to develop with those I met, bringing different social issues to the forefront. My close friendship with Leo raised questions about identity and different views of the world. Interaction with the group's director, Belle, highlighted the desire for transnational communication and business negotiations that many Cuban artists seek. My encounters with Madeleine, a 27-year-old woman, exposed me to the problems that many Cubans face on a daily basis, such as caring for a child as a single parent and the need to resort to jiniterismo, the sale of services to tourists, including sex, in order to make ends meet. I set off for my second excursion with the addition of a professional video camera and a vague intention to investigate the body in dance, how it is shaped by and in turn shapes sexuality and gender roles in Cuba. However, while I was diligently looking for evidence to fit my research plan, I found other questions presenting themselves that seemed to permeate every observation and interaction. It was as if I couldn't see the wood for the trees, so to speak, so I started meditating on those trees. Daily rehearsals often began with a half-hour speech by Belle, the director, about sacrifice, hard work, and moral values. The dancers' responses ranged from afflicted pleas for some wages to pay rent or buy food to silent resignation and boredom and cigarette lighting, which infuriated the director. I became interested in the disparity between the concerns of the direction and those of the dancers. How is it that in Cuba, in Castro's purpose-built egalitarian society, there seem to be such differences between people's experiences and life expectancies within such a small group? I wanted to know what kept the dancers in the group when they seemed to be so disinterested in it as a unit. Did they like to dance? These were some of the concerns that turned my attention to finding out what the dancers were actually doing in Cuba Haiti. There were also significant changes in the musical style of the Cuba Haiti's repertoire. The musicians had doubled in number with the introduction of a double bass, a keyboard, saxophone, modern drum kit, and even an electric guitar. In addition to a new contemporary feel in much of the choreography, this got me thinking about what Cuban culture is. Who decides what style of music and dance represent Cubanness, or Cubanidad? Is the notion of a revolutionary ideal reflected in the lives of dancers? If not, how do they find spaces to create and express their own identities, which perhaps incorporate non-Cuban flavours and loyalties that may be outside a revolutionary dictum? As these questions began to arise in the first week of my second field trip, I was struck with appendicitis and had to have surgery, incapacitating me for a week. I had intended to participate in dance rehearsals to try to experience the physical and psychological demands of training every day and to better understand the daily lives of those on whom my study would focus. However, since I couldn't physically do it, I became more of an observer than a participant. I took notes, filmed, and chatted with the dancers and musicians if they had a free moment, which wasn't very often. However, it seemed that I was included in the group. Belle's preliminary speeches would always include me, often asking for my opinion on matters, apparently to endorse his own views vis-à-vis others, perhaps to represent a Western ideal to which members of the group should aspire. Aside from filming many of the rehearsals and most of the shows, I interviewed several of the dancers extensively and the choreographer of the group. I also made many notes about more informal conversations with people both inside and outside the group. I kept a research journal and a personal journal, writing down every question that came up about what I was experiencing and seeing, even if it didn't seem directly related to my research. I spent as much time as possible with Cubans, attending birthday parties and informal visits to friends and family. Most of the dancers were followers of the Santeria or Afro-Cuban Palo religions, and I accompanied them to many ceremonies and festivities. I also went out almost every night with them to the Escalinata, or what the dancers called the Escalera, which was the main outdoor performance area in Trinidad. Often we would continue to the disco. I often felt unable to reach the real person. Being a white female Yuma, which is Cuban for foreign, certainly affected how the dancers and most Cubans interacted with me, as did the fact that they knew I was studying them. For example, Yali gave me an explanation for her evening with some American tourists as simply friends having fun and involved no money, while some of her friends later told me that one of the men had given her $80. Lindsay told me in an interview how she loves to dance on any occasion, but I often observed her refusing to dance in various situations. Also, although I speak Spanish quite well, Cuban Spanish has all sorts of peculiarities that are much harder to understand. While I had an enormous amount of help from Leo, who spent many hours translating Cubanish into Spanish for me, the task of truly understanding the deeper meanings within another language and culture requires significantly more time in the field. The use of audio and video recordings helped tremendously in two ways. I was able to show the videos to the dancers and gain their own knowledge of what was going on, and I was also able to review it as many times as necessary to better understand what was being said, either visually or verbally. Despite my attempt to collect as much rich data as possible, I am still painfully aware of its limitations, not only because of the language problem and the little time I spent in the field, but also because I believe that all knowledge can only be partial and is always situational in both time and space. However, I hope that my snapshot of a group of folk dancers can contribute in a very small way to the body of anthropological research and knowledge as a whole, showing that dance can be more than just a performance for an audience.